buy the decent quality food my kid needs. And what happens if somebody in the family gets sick and I have a large deductible? How am I going to pay that? I can't go to the doctor. My mom's sick. She can't afford prescription drugs. What am I going to do? And right now, throughout this country, there are millions of people living with massive amounts of stress. And do you know what happens when you live with stress? That's right. Now here is a fact. I think many of you may know that pathetically, despite all of the money we spend on healthcare in this country, we have a lower life expectancy than other wealthy countries. You all know that? About 4 years younger. But what you don't know is that working class Americans are living 6 years shorter lives than the wealthy. A number of years ago, I did a hearing in the Senate. We had a bunch of doctors up there. And what they were talking about is what's called diseases of despair. You know what that is? And that is that when people live under constant stress, when every single day is a battle for survival, things happen to their minds, things happen to their bodies. They get sicker, physically sicker, mentally as well. And the end result of that is a lot of people in this country die because they're trying to escape life, and they're turning to drugs, they're turning to booze, they're turning to cigarettes, whatever. But the bottom line is that in the richest country in the history of this world, millions of our people are struggling just to survive and are experiencing enormous stress. Now, what our job is to profoundly take on the ideology of the corporate world and the oligarchs. And what our job is to understand, and you're not going to hear too many people talking about it, is that today and into the future, when we see an explosion of technology with AI and robotics, we can fulfill what humanity has been dreaming about for a very long time. We can, in fact, provide a good quality standard of living for every man, woman, and child on this country. But in order to do that, we're going to have to take on the greed of the oligarchs, and we're going to have to tell them that no, it is not acceptable from a moral or economic point of view that one man, Mr. Musk, has more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Now, am I missing something, or is that totally crazy that one guy has more wealth than the bottom half of households in America? Does anybody think it is vaguely right that the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%? Anybody think it's right that CEOs of large corporations make 350 times what their workers make? So that is what our struggle is about, is to take on the greed of these people and say, you know what? You cannot and will not have it all. But their greed is not only, and sometimes I stop and I think about it. I mean, how much money does anybody need? I mean, really, everybody wants to have money. No great secret about that. But the idea The idea that these guys are prepared to support legislation which takes food away from hungry kids, throws people off of health care, cuts housing, in order what? To give them a massive tax break that they don't need. They have enough money, these guys, to support their family for the next 1,000 years. They don't need any more. But it's not just what's going on in America today is not just massive amounts and unprecedented amounts of income and wealth inequality. That's bad enough. But what these guys are also doing is moving very rapidly to control our political system. The worst decision, I think, or at least one of them, made by the U.S. Supreme Court, and they made a lot of bad decisions, but certainly one of them was this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And the result of that decision is that right now, billionaires have spent many, many hundreds of millions of dollars in both political parties to support their candidates. Now, I have an idea. I want you to hear me here. Any one of you who wants to kick in a mere $270 million to a presidential candidate, you know what? Hey, you can end up having the most important position in government. Only $270 million. But that's not just Musk helping to elect Trump. One of the reasons, in my view, that Kamala Harris lost this election is she had too many billionaires telling her not to speak up for the working class of this country.
On U.S. media, be it CNN or whoever, my message to the Americans, this does not work. Tariffs do not work. I've been listening to Ronald Reagan a lot, and, you know, tariffs are terrible for the global economy. What it does is reduce competitiveness, and it has more of a monopoly. People rely on government handouts, and what that causes? That causes inflation. So it does not work, and proof is in the pudding. I've been pounding the president and Howard Lutnick, Secretary Lutnick. You're doing nothing but hurting the American people. When you tariff Canadians, you're hurting Americans, and proof is in the pudding now. The auto sector, you heard, is $6.5 billion they've lost. And that's just the beginning. It's just going to continue. And the mayor mentioned it. I've always said you can't unscramble an egg. You got to make the omelet larger. And let's grow together. Let's create the AmCan fortress. That's what we need to do. And then Procter & Gamble announced $1 billion loss, and Mattel and Walmart, and that list goes down. And they don't even have enough workers to fill the jobs down in the U.S. So, folks, let's just keep focusing on what we can do. And that's what I've said to the premiers and the prime minister. Yeah, always keep an eye on Trump, but let's focus on how we can be more competitive and be the greatest jurisdiction in the world. We got the critical minerals. We have the energy. We're leading the G7 in nuclear energy that everyone wants. We're leading the world with small modular reactors. So we have everything going for ourselves. One thing, that's the only credit I'm going to give this guy, is he's united the country. He's united the country no matter what political stripe you're from. We're all Canadians. We're all Ontarians. And we're going to fight like no tomorrow. But thank you, and may God bless the people of Ontario.
Done here first. Okay. And it's very significant. It's unique. We get the benefit. The second thing is, you know, and I'll take your analogy. And I have played some hockey over the years. And there is a time in a game, in a big game, and this is a big game, when you go hard in the corners, your elbows up. The time in a game where you drop the gloves in the first period and you send a message. And we've done that pretty uniquely in the world. We happen to have the best deal with the Americans right now. I know. But there's also a time in a game where you want the puck, you want a stick handle, you want to pass, you want to put the puck in the net. And we're moving later into the game, and we're at that time in the game. And that's where the engagement.
On this day, 34 years ago,
Ukraine declared its independence from the Soviet Union. And Canada was one of the first countries to recognize Ukraine as a sovereign nation. Since then, Canada and Ukraine have deepened our long-standing friendship, a friendship rooted in the shared values of peace, security, and democracy. Over 1 million Ukrainian Canadians call Canada home, which means that every triumph and every tragedy on Ukrainian soil is felt deeply right here on ours. Canada's support for Ukraine is unwavering, and we are with you every step of the way in your fight to defend your sovereignty and to realize your dreams for your country. Happy Ukrainian Independence Day. Slava Ukraini.
As I understand it, the European leaders are in agreement that there needs to be a ceasefire first before anything else, that if Ukraine pulls out of any territory, Russia needs to pull out of territory as well, and that if there is an agreement here, Ukraine must have security guarantees, including the possibility of sometime acceding to NATO membership. Do you believe that Donald Trump is on board with all of that?
Well, I believe the European leaders and Ukraine brought out a good statement last night after successful talks with Vice President Vance in London. It's important that the US is engaging with European allies and with Ukraine to prepare for the meeting on Friday. And of course, when it comes to full-scale negotiations, and let's hope that Friday will be an important step in that process. We need Ukraine at the table. It will be about territory. It will be, of course, about security guarantees, but also about the absolute need to acknowledge that Ukraine decides on its own future, that Ukraine has to be a sovereign nation, deciding on its own geopolitical future, of course, having no limitations to its own military troop levels, and for NATO to have no limitations on our presence on the eastern flank in countries like Latvia, Estonia.
I will have another phone call with President Trump today. We are preparing intensively at the European level together with the American government for this meeting, and we hope and assume that the government of Ukraine, that President Zelensky will be involved in this meeting. In any case, we cannot accept that territorial issues between Russia and America are discussed or even decided over the heads of Europeans and Ukrainians. I assume that the American government sees it the same way. That is why there is this close coordination. We cannot accept that the entire European security is further threatened by Russia, and therefore there can be no peace that rewards Russian aggressive actions and possibly encourages and emboldens further actions. That is the message we have jointly expressed here, and I am really grateful that we are in a very, very close dialogue with the Americans. What happens on Friday in Alaska must not remain without result. It must have consequences, either in the direction of increasing pressure on Russia once again, or that Russia realizes on its own that this war cannot be continued.
Okay, fine. We're just not buying. We're moving on. It's been a huge benefit to Canadian industries, Canadian operations. And you know, everyone thought we were going to crack and break financially, economically. We're under enormous economic pressure, but we see jobs, 68,000 new jobs in Canada in September. We are not seeing the stagnation that's happening in the United States. And all that money that would have gone south is going into our communities and our businesses. So we're adapting and we're changing. And Donald Trump is the cause of all of this. So he gave us one good thing. He gave us a reason to work together, but we will continue to oppose and speak out against the disintegration of deterioration of democracy on our border.
Peace, God willing, we get peace. Are you open to holding an election in your country?
Yes, of course. We are open for election, yes. We have to do safety circumstances, and a little bit we need to work in the parliament, because during the war you can't have elections, but we can do security. We need, we need a truth, yes, everywhere, the battlefield, in the sky and the sea, to make possible for people to do democratic, open, legal elections.
So you say during the war you can't have elections. So let me just say 3.5 years from now. So you mean if we happen to be in a war with somebody No more elections. Oh, that's good. I wonder what the fake.
You like this idea?
Yeah.
No.
Speaking of
Welcome. Thank you for taking this time, just at a crucial moment in this process. Under President Zelensky's leadership, we have the conditions, the possibility of a just and lasting peace. But that requires a willing Russia. And the barbarism that we saw overnight, the attack on Kyiv, shows just how important it is that we stand with Ukraine during this difficult time, and that we create the conditions for this just and lasting peace and a true reconstruction. And I want to underscore something that has happened in recent weeks, is that the development of that possibility under your leadership, and also the prospect of true prosperity for the Ukrainian people. I'll just finish with one point on Canada. We've provided military assistance, further military assistance. We're announcing today further economic assistance for Ukraine, $2.5 billion worth of economic assistance that helps unlock financing from the IMF, from the World Bank, from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development to begin this process of rebuilding. We have an important bilateral meeting and then a meeting virtually with our colleagues from the Coalition of the Willing, Ichiri Ocha,